So, why are we reading the Republic? Well, first of all, this is Plato's Republic. In my personal opinion, this is the greatest book ever written. I think everyone should read it. And in a philosophy class, it's the kind of book that's almost bound to be relevant to many different types of philosophy class approaches philosophy. But why are we reading it for this class? Which is essentially a class in the philosophy of human nature. Well, we're reading it because, as I said in the introduction to the course, it is a particular representative of a certain approach, a more general approach to the understanding of human nature, the rationalist understanding of human nature. So, the short answer to why we're reading it is because in this book is a theory of human nature. You have to be patient. We're reading the whole book. We're not reading some excerpt out of context, which will leave you with a superficial understanding of what Plato was getting at. We're going to read the whole book, and hopefully, what you'll come out of is a substantive um, understanding of what Plato was getting at with some depth. So you have to be patient. The theory of human nature doesn't really come until book four. There's 10 books. So you have to be patient, and it may not be obvious at first why we're reading it, because there's no obvious theory of human nature being presented, but there will be. And I want to get to it as it unfolds through the actual book. That's the whole point of reading the whole thing, rather than just reading an excerpt from it. But I won't be giving it away, or I will be giving it away, but that's okay to say that there is a theory of human nature, which we will eventually get to. It is a rationalist theory of human nature. That is, it is a conception of human nature that believes that reason, our capacity to think and understand and know, is the most essential and important aspect of being a human being, of human nature. That there are other aspects, other parts of us that are not rational, that are not about thinking, but that the point of life is to establish the dominance of the rational part over those other parts. That is, it's not just rationalist in the sense Plato's theory of human nature is not just rationalist in the sense that it says that we are thinking beings. It's rationalist in the sense that it recognizes that there are other aspects, non-rational aspects, of being a human being, but that the rational part of us has to establish itself as the leader of those other parts. And that's kind of the point of life, and not so easy to do, considering how powerful those other parts of us are, most prominently the desires, the, the desires for pleasure, essentially. So that's why we're reading the book, because it does have this theory of human nature embedded in it as a part of its argument. It is not a book that is called Plato's Theory of Human Nature. It's called The Republic, which indicates that it is a work of political philosophy. And it is a work of political philosophy, but not primarily, I would say. We'll see that primarily it is a book about the question of justice. And we'll have to talk about that word, justice. We're dealing with a work that was written in Greek 2,500 years ago or so. So it's been translated into contemporary English. So we're looking at the word justice quite a bit in this work. We should be cognizant that that's not the word that Plato used. Justice is an English word that's derived from a Latin word, but Plato wrote in Greek. The dike, the word that's translated as justice, is the central idea or the central concern of the book. Justice is a fine translation. We just have to be aware of those nuances. Um, Much of the book is concerned with defining what justice is, and that is much of what the book is. But the book is not called Plato's Theory of Justice either. It's called The Republic. Maybe it shouldn't be called the Republic. If I had to suggest one clunky alternative title that actually described the main purpose of the book, I would call it Plato's idea of why you should be just rather than unjust. And that really is the key to the book. As we'll see in book one, the question is raised about how we should live. And for the Greeks, it naturally lent itself to discussing it in terms of justice. That is, the main choice in how I should live is whether I should be just or whether I should be unjust, which would produce the happier, better life. So we'll see that question is raised very dramatically in book one by a character named Thrasymachus, and it's actually raised before Thrasymachus, but Thrasymachus gives this very um, startling theory that the life of injustice is better than the life of justice, and it's really Socrates' attempt to refute that, to argue definitively that the life of justice is better than the life of injustice, which constitutes the most important question of the book, and everything else in the book follows from that. That is, Plato's not trying to define justice for its own sake. Plato in this book is trying to define justice for the sake of arguing that the just life is better than the unjust life. That always has to be kept in mind when you're reading Plato's Republic. And we'll see that this theory of human nature is absolutely key to that. That is, Plato's idea of what a human being consists of, these three parts of us, which he'll call the rational part, the spirited part, and the, let's call it the appetitive part, the desiring part. And the proper arrangement of those parts in a human being is the linchpin of his argument for the just life over the unjust one. So we're reading it primarily in this class because it contains a theory of human nature. But that theory of human nature is in support of a larger purpose that Plato has in this work, and that is to argue that the just life for a human being is better than an unjust one.